Tonight's topic, as you can see, tactics for Toronto's high-growth startups, something that many people obviously want to talk about. What are some of the most successful companies and leaders doing at their respective startups today that have gotten them to where they are? And what have they seen from other peers or colleagues in their space? So I'm going to start directly to my left, Jocelyn Brown, the quick bio. As SVP Customers and Revenue, Jocelyn Brown is dedicating to helping Allocadia's customers achieve the highest levels of marketing performance management and maximize the business value of their investments. Her team provides a seamless and value-driven experience to every customer, from initial interest through continued growth to best support progression through the stages of budgeting, planning, and performance excellence. Having spent more than 17 years in the B2B and SaaS spaces, Jocelyn brings extensive experience building and managing high-performing customer success teams that drive revenue and value and develop lifelong customers. Most recently, she spent 9 years at Allocadia in customer success and global market readiness roles. Round of applause for Jocelyn tonight, please. Mark is a general management executive with a track record of delivering significant growth in new business markets. He prides himself on being a results-oriented leader who focuses on operational excellence through developing teams and motivating change across functional groups. At FreshBooks, Mark leads the efforts to grow community of loyal micro-business customers. Please welcome Mark to the panel, everyone. So, when I gather information from all the panelists, one of the things I do is ask them to share with me 3 hobbies or 3 interesting things about them. And I think this is the first time where the panelists' hobbies overlapped. So I thought I'd share it because they may want to know it about each other. And unbeknownst to the panelists here, I asked both of them about their interests. And apparently Mark loves to canoe, and Jocelyn is on the board of the Canadian Canoe Museum. So this summer, I know what you guys will be doing, planning team trip canoe. Let's start with...
We actually do know each other
through
canoeing.
Okay, perfect. So you guys already canoe often. Perfect. You have to turn it on first. Salespeople have too much beer at these events. Let's start off with a fairly broad topic. We'll start off broad, and then we'll get a bit more granular and specific to your teams and what you've learned. Of course, one of the things that I think a lot of people want to know about or want to hear about is the evolving state of sales. Your teams, I imagine, have evolved, and how you've built teams have evolved from your Allocadia days to obviously what you're doing now. So can you give me a glimpse as to... let's start with Mark, because you've been at FreshBooks for a while now, and you've seen how things have evolved, I imagine, over time. What has happened over the last decade or half decade at companies with respect to how sales teams are growing or functioning day to day?
Sure. Thanks, everyone, for coming out in January. I'm glad they didn't say how long I've been in sales, because it's a bit longer than you. So if I look back, what's changed a lot in the last 5 years, obviously we've moved to contracting around monthly and annual contracts a lot more, which I think is a really good thing. And the reason I think it's a good thing is it puts a much bigger onus on us as sellers to actually deliver value. So if I sort of looked at what the sales process used to look like, it was like, sell them, get them sold, and then huck them over the fence, and hopefully they wouldn't churn out before you had to renew them in 2 or 3 years. And so I think what we do with customers leading into the actual sale, and then the post 90-day, so things like onboarding, engagement scoring, all have really risen up. And at FreshBooks, like we onboard something like 35,000 trials a month and about 3,000 new customers a month. So you can't do that by just looking at your sales reps, looking at everyone. So the other big thing I've really seen progress, which is quite amazing, is, and I think truly we've now sort of crossed over into data and science and away from art. And I always hated when people would just be like, selling's an art, and you just know if you fucking got it or you don't got it, and that's fucking bullshit. And so to me, I really do like that you can intersect data and science and trends. I can see now when my sales teams or my sales managers are bullshitting customers because I can see their engagement scores in the first 10 or 15 days. And I think that's just a much healthier place to sell from. And then we get much more alignment around the organization. So those would be the big ones for me.
I'm glad you brought those numbers up because we're going to talk a little bit later about focus, right? With so many people coming inbound, how do you know where to focus your time, which customers to focus on? Because things can just drag on. What about you, Jocelyn?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing different or not even that different from Mark, but my sales career, I sold media at the beginning of my career, but my software sales career really started in customer success. So just that concept that the value of a customer is actually going to grow truly exponentially beyond the first contract, that initial one really is a land and expand. I think land and expand is even kind of more meaningful for more businesses. And that really has to be the way you approach your go-to-market. It does change how your pre-sales and just leading up to that first sale is, because you're going to very quickly know whether you can actually get to the full lifetime value of that customer, and it's a material part of the business. So as I said, I started in customer success with large expand targets, and that became at some point in your company, that's a bigger number than your new number, and it comes very quickly. So that focus on expand as being a substantial part of your business means that you really have to tighten up the value you're delivering to customers through every interaction with your company. You have no lock on them.
Does that impact you? Because you're potentially selling to a team of one.
Yeah, no, it does. And actually, for the first time this year, up at my level and then the managers that look after, I'm actually bonusing them on LTV growth. And we can actually, through our data models, actually measure LTV. And if they're sticking and they're not churning, we're actually incenting them with a bigger piece of the pie. Because just to do pure in-the-door number or pure in-the-door first sale is actually a really harsh metric. So I think we'll see a lot of evolution in this particular area, where your companies will, over time, and depending on what you do, they'll score customers within first interaction. They'll score them after day 2. They'll score them after day 7. It'll all be done automated, and the scoring is actually going to be a much better indicator of what that customer is worth. And we will give our reps and our managers the benefit of a better performing customer.
So does that score how they're interacting with your product?
Yeah. So right now we can do most of it on product engagement, but you can also start to pull in like how many calls are they making into your support organization. And so I think over time you're going to see some sophisticated scoring. And if you have enough trend data, or I think there's going to be companies out there that will provide you the trend data if you want to score yourself against it, you're going to be able to start saying like this cohort of customers is worth a lot more. Interestingly, I was at a meeting last week where instead of people pitching me to give us VC money, they pitched me on the concept is we'll buy cohorts of your customers if you can tell us how good they are long-term value at much cheaper financing than we'd have to get from venture capitalists, which I thought was a really great alignment of all things coming together.
Okay, that was looking back. We've started to talk about the cusp of what are we doing going forward, scoring, focusing or incenting reps on LTV and aspects like that. What are some of your top initiatives going to 2020? What are you focusing on with your teams? What come to mind that you're trying to put pressure on or bring to the spotlight? Jocelyn, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I should have a quicker answer to that.
You can defer to Mark.
No, it's fine. I'm actually in the middle of my year, so my fiscal starts in July, so I'm like halfway through. I'm into my second version of what my focus goals are. Scoring's a piece of it for sure, and we're using that information that we have about LTV in sort of cohorts or certainly within industries or otherwise to expand our ICP. We're much smaller than FreshBooks and certainly starting to expand our market based on how profitable the customers are that we have in our existing markets.
That's taking a look at what additional products you can sell them, their growth rate, and trying to track what additional, how they can expand on your product?
Yeah, and it's maybe even a bit more basic. For us, it's where to go next. So, you know, we would have had, you talk about focus, we certainly follow a model of an ideal customer profile and looking at really going after that. Inbound will end up getting people outside of that ICP. We'll start seeing an industry or a type of company that looks really profitable. It takes a little bit of time before we get a sense of whether they actually are, but it allows us to act relatively quickly and going outside of our ICP, but not wasting a bunch of time trying to capture a market that's not ready for us or we don't have a solution for. Because you have a lot more early indicators of, and you have some experience from your other customers of the likely lifetime value of a customer based on sort of behavior and other types of things, we're starting to be able to maybe act a little bit earlier and with more confidence as opposed to going into a whole new industry kind of blank, not knowing. We've got a lot of stuff already understood about it. So some of it for us is focusing on really where can we go next. We certainly want to look at future additional products. But we continue to really focus on our expand strategy. For us, that continues to be what's going to make profitable growth for us is getting a smart land that does not take us forever to get. We're enterprise software, so I do not have the volume that Mark is talking about. In fact, that terrifies me. I just certainly couldn't staff that. Everybody would be on the phone. But it allows us to move into new places intelligently. So I think just the abundance of data we have is how are you going to apply that to have more profitable growth and be more consistent in how you actually go after new things. You still have to experiment. You still have to go outside of your comfort zone because you're not going to, if you don't change, you're not actually going to grow. But I think you just have a lot more available to you to do it intelligently.
How do you involve your customers in this process, right? Because you're thinking about expanding opportunities, LTV. Do you actually go out and ask your customer what other products or what other teams could use our product, or is this an internal process?
No, I mean, our customers, I'm lucky. I joined Allocadia as the customer success leader and eventually took over sort of all the field-facing non-technical functions. And it was customer-driven when I got there. It was founded by twin sisters that essentially built the product ground up for customers. So that kind of was bread and the bone. We wouldn't probably go somewhere if a customer hadn't already taken us there to some degree. So we're led by our customers in terms of what they are trying to tell us through the tool, what they're trying to accomplish through our ongoing engagement with them in CS, and then through customer advisory board and a lot of the sort of standard things you do. But yeah, feedback loops and otherwise, and very much driven by customers. Is
that weekly, monthly? How are you involving them in the customer advisory board and everything outside of CS? Because that's they're driving that conversation versus you're driving that conversation.
Yeah, so the advisory board is 3 times a year, but our product team also has they have targets around how many customers they talk to monthly, and that's both proactive and reactive. So the product team has an ongoing conversation outside of the management of the account. Again, enterprise, the CS team is typically talking to the account, and so the product's really at the user level. My executive team also has targets about talking to customers, and then I've just launched some external research into customers, similar to a win-loss in the new logo side. I'm doing the same on the customer side to try and uncover some of those elements as well.
I love that, targets. That's how you hold accountability for product people or executives rather than being ad hoc. We'll talk to them when we feel we need to. Yep. Mark, what's on your plate going into 2020? And then I think next is how do you staff for 35,000 inbounds a month?
So it's interesting. So one of the shifts we've made is we actually now have 6 different segments of customers that we focus on. And we now have 4 different sales teams, and we actually have a whole non-assisted, no sales assistant funnel. So for us, the real challenge as you try and accelerate is, like, how do you pick off those people early on and when, and get them to the right people faster? And ultimately, I think that's probably where I actually spend the vast majority of my time, is thinking about if we've trained the reps and we've done the right thing, and usually we hire really good, smart people who want to work. You know, my job and the sales manager's job and everyone's is about how do we make them more productive, right? And so by productive is get you more conversations with the right people who are willing to buy. So things we're investing in is, like, I think you've seen a lot of people try and adopt sort of AI and bots. I think we swung way too far in like full automation. So we've been experimenting with sort of where is the right fit between actually using the bots to separate people and then getting them into live conversations as quickly as possible. And so we're experimenting with that a lot, and we're experimenting it with different places on our website. So to get to, you know, our new acquisition, large account people, we have a totally different experience on certain pages. If you get into our paywalls, like we're customizing it. I think we'll experiment and continue to, actually, it's a good place to hire very new junior people in to staff those bots so they can sort of learn, and they're almost like mini traffic cops for the day, and then they evaluate. So that's one. I come from an enterprise background before I joined FreshBooks, so I used to sell to banks and insurance. So I know that we're trying to figure out how we can adopt some of the more sort of day in the life demo selling, but sort of on steroids. So we're really looking at sort of activating, like, what does a typical BDR, what are they capable of doing? So it's all very metric driven. And then, you know, I think the other really interesting thing that's coming along for us all is I'd love to not talk to 35,000 people. I'd like to talk to 7 or 6 or whatever the right metric is, and weed out all the other folks. And so working, I think, a lot hand in hand to that. The other big problem, and I think everyone's going to encounter it, you can go to any of the big data sources. My favorite one are the Profit Well folks who basically tag all the data. I believe it's the last 5 years, customer acquisition via digital has doubled every single year. So if you don't solve that problem and you can't move the ARPU of your what you're selling, you're a bit fucked. So you got to figure out, and sorry if there's people from Google and Facebook in here, they're killing us all, and they're genericizing everything, and everyone's learned sort of all the tricks, and you can go out there. So it's not enough anymore to just digitally buy on the big platforms. It's just not going to work. So I think that's a shift we're working on with a lot of our marketing colleagues, is to say, you know, what's the next thing? And it's probably less volume and more of the people we want to talk to at the right time to talk to them.
I think if I'm reading between the lines, this is hard. Right, this shit is hard, and you've identified. Mark, you just quickly spoke about some of the things that didn't work. Over personalizing, going to some of the more commoditized places to buying ads or online. Anything else that comes to mind? What didn't work in 2019 that you'd hoped for, you thought for, you're divesting in, and you're not nearly spending as much time on? I'll leave it open-ended, but there's plenty of things that are working.
I have this amazing ability to let go of things that were really bad. So I often don't remember until somebody tells me. I've definitely let go of some stuff. I'm not sure I can recall it right at the moment. I mean, I think like anybody, we're in a constant state of experimentation, because what worked last week doesn't work this, right? So I think certainly within our outbound practices and anywhere where we're playing with personalization, or we're trying to get an edge over the trick that everybody else in the universe is learned. We're certainly continuing to adjust and test length and all those kinds of things. I think you have to just go in with a learner mindset and continue and just accept that stuff's going to change. Once you figure it out, it's going to change. So I would think there's lots of experiments that failed for us that we're doing again. We've been trying to look at more interesting ways to access. So I have, probably I have a very active and vocal set of sort of admins and super users and people that I spend time with, but then I have this massive pool of kind of casual users, but they keep showing up in my deals. So I've been trying to find ways to connect and stay connected with them as they move through jobs. So for me, I'm actually just trying to find more ways to connect with the people, make sure the people who've had an experience with my team, because we are a fairly high-touch program, have ways to continue to connect with us, because that repeat buyer is my best buyer by far. So the more of them I can find, the better connected I can stay to them, the better is for me. And I've tried several things around that, and some of them have failed for sure. But I will keep trying that, because that's actually just such a powerful, I'd love to know that they're there before they just pop on a call and I'm like, oh, you're here, great. So I'm doing a lot of stuff around that. And for me, certainly, I don't have the volume, so bots would have been useless to me. So I have to focus on the human interaction. So a lot of probably what I spend time with the reps, my CSMs, my AMs, anybody, is just on the human connection, because it's probably what's missing from a lot of other places. So a lot of work on empathy, a lot of work on actually active listening, all those things that are not new, but kind of got divested when technology and an over-reliance on data came into place. So your differentiation sometimes can be just being more human.
Two things that I still wish I could learn not to do as much of. I still think we're sort of a perverse industry in that we try and experiment too much. We're not patient, and we try and run too many experiments. I'm guilty of it, and I think if I look back in 2019, a couple splits I did on thinking about how the sales team could maybe sell a little bit better if we gave them a little bit more focus. It was just wasn't a good call or a good use of resources. So, my message to myself is always like double down more on the things that you do well. There's usually a lot more in there than most people give themselves credit. We just haven't focused on it. So we're back to doing a few more things that we do well. Like we sort of split one of our upsell groups into like 3 or 4 different groups. We've now amalgamated it back, and like I'm already seeing the rewards of just giving people more good deals to go after and not try and be so cute with that. So that was awful. And then I know better, because I hate it when people do it to me, but just don't give people 2 hats to wear. Like, give them 1 hat. It would be my advice. So I tried to give I also run the support organization at FreshBooks, and it's sort of one of our big sticking point, and I tried to make my support people onboarders, and it was abject failure because they just ignored me. And it's really bad when like 85 people just ignore what you want them to do. But they were 100% right. Like they're like, this is idiotic, it's a bad thing to do. And I was trying to get a little bit of leverage out of a bigger group. And, we pivoted away from that, and, we put 2 focus heads on it, and it's 10 times ahead of where it is. So my advice usually in mistakes is it's usually my mistake, and it usually goes back to 3 or 4 or 5 things we know to do better, and just like take the time and challenge yourself of why would you change what you know doesn't work.
I'm going to push back on that because I see a lot of heads shaking a bit. Not everyone has the luxury of FreshBooks, whether it's the amount raised or the growth. And is it feasible not to wear 2 hats? Like, if I take a look at both of your functions, both of you are doing things that overlap, right? Like, or working 2 different functions. So is that a larger scale issue, or do you agree with tend to disagree with that.
I tend to try to make sure that the people who work for me don't wear multiple hats and that I wear the most hats, which is not scalable and not good for me. But because I'm inclined to agree a little bit with Mark on that one, it is very tough to split people's interests because they're going to get energy typically from one or the other, and so they're going to go to where the energy is, and then you're going to get underperformance in the other function, and then it's not really good for them. You're constantly forcing them to make a decision between two things. So it is a luxury of scale to get really specialized, no question. But as much as I can, I'm inclined to follow Mark's lead on that one, except with myself.
And I think you like, yeah, FreshBooks is at a scale now. Like when I showed up 5 years ago, and Dusty's a FreshBook alumni, so he knows he was there. We didn't have a sales team for the first 7, 8 years at FreshBooks. There was not one like true acquisition seller or upseller. And so like I do think when you double down and you triple down and you like quadruple down, there's a lot inside some of those plays. They will eventually like run out, but they ran 8 years before I showed up of product enhancements and good customer support, and you know it was $22 million in ARR when I showed up. Like that's pretty good for no sellers.
It's pretty fucking good.
Right? So
no
like
sellers.
I'm like so to me it just proves. I think the bigger, like the harder thing to figure out, so like we're going through it in my job right now, is like, do we pivot and do we like put a new investment in? And there's questions later on channel and all those things, and everyone's gonna walk in and everyone who's a specialist in channel sales is gonna tell you need a fucking channel, and I'm not quite sure you do. Like if it makes sense for what you're selling, do it, but you know, most of the data tells you you have one, maybe two power distribution. Like no one's got like 6. So why are we running 6 plays in a particular organization, right? So you just have to be like really careful. You're just not doing something because you're sort of bored of doing what you're doing versus is it the right thing to do for the
Soon sales reps are going to come in with like a quarterback, all the plays on their hand before I get on a sales. How big's the sales team now?
We're just over 60 folks everywhere, and then we'll hopefully double that again this year.
Wow. So let's talk about exactly that focus. Focus specifically for your sales teams or your customer success teams. I'm hearing about different plays. I'm hearing about product enhancements. I'm hearing about initiatives on the marketing acquisition, bots. There's a lot going on. How do you keep your sales team focused? Because they have to be kept abreast of this stuff. They have to know what's going on in the product team. They have to know what customers are saying. How do you keep them updated?
So,
how do you keep them focused? More importantly, and sorry,
that's all right.
There's not only are they dealing with that, they're dealing with customers stringing them along, or potential customers stringing them along. So what are you doing internally right now?
So I actually think this is if you can find the right sales managers, so not people who run the sales organization at the top, but the actual people who are in the trenches with the team, and you empower those folks to tell everyone else hey, the team's not ready, it can't take more in. Those are the first line of defense because they're the ones working day to day, right? And there's only so many things that, great, let's learn spin selling on Monday and product features on Tuesday, and all the product people will be like, I need to get in and see your team. And I'm like, no, you don't. Just build a fucking better product. It'll be easier to sell. But I do think you do ultimately have control as the sales leaders. And if you're working for an organization that isn't controlling that adequately and letting you do your job, I'd look for another job. And I think that's the one thing that's super underrated, and people jump for like the next story that like the CEO tells you or the VCs tell you. Like good sales managers, I mean really good sales managers are worth their weight in gold. and they are the first line of defense when your reps having a shitty day or a shitty week, or when they're flying so high that they think they can do no wrong. It's that moderation, and I've had tons of reps who've left and come back to the organization because they chase the shiny penny and they're like, oh, that sucks. So I think it really begins and ends with really good senior sales managers, directors of sales, people who like the craft, they like the people, they like the coaching. That's where you got to invest.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest lesson taking over sales, having come from customer success, was just that frontline management in sales is probably one of the hardest jobs, but also one of the most critical to get right for a lot of those reasons. Your sales team's time and attention is important, and they actually don't have to know everything. If there's that kind of extraneous stuff, there's probably other roles that can help the reps for that. So surrounding them with the right mechanisms to be able to get that help, to know when to ask for it, to be confident in being able to say, that's interesting, I don't know, let me get the right person, is way more valuable than trying to get them to learn everything soup to nuts. It's not helpful. So you can only talk to my sales team on Monday mornings at 8 Pacific. If you need to talk to them, that is your slot, full stop. And everything else has to be within sort of the constructs of the plays we're trying to run. And too bad they're in company meetings and stuff like that, but that's it.
What is the day in the life of a sales manager at your org?
I saw the question on there and I was like, I should ask somebody. So this is about building sales in high growth companies in Toronto. My company's headquartered in Vancouver. So my inside selling team is there. It's a lot of coaching. The frontline managers, they're doing, so we run an OKR system in our company, so they typically are responsible for any of the sales OKR projects, so they might be doing some collaboration across other teams to get some things done. They're working with sales ops. They're probably the feedback loop to product, although I rely on SEs predominantly to do that. But the bulk of their day is really deal strategy and coaching and working with the reps. So I try to keep that ratio pretty reasonable.
Bulk is in 60%, 90%?
Of their day coaching? Yep. Well, again, you know what? Literally, I'm throwing a dart because I'm not there. I think it's probably in the range of 60. It is very intensive. Probably not my sort of one level up from leader. They're probably doing a lot more project and cross company collaboration work than that. But they're in deals, they're talking to customers, their deal strategy, they're trying to make sure that everybody's got everything they need to be more productive. Their job is to make their team more productive so that we're getting the outcome we want. And a sales leader that I really like and respect, he's like, you actually just manage the managers to their goal. Like, sitting in my chair, which is great, that's less people. They're the advocate for the people on their team, that they can be as efficient as possible, that they're getting the resources that they need, and that they're spending as much time with customers as possible. And product feature updates does not rate in that for me.
Number one rule, sales isn't research. So go do your own research, go talk to the customers yourself, dig into the CRM system, the data's all there. So that's rule number one. I don't want the sales managers in meetings teaching other people about our market or whatever. That's actually not their role. I've actually had CEOs who's asked me if I could reorganize the quota of my team so that they could research better off it, and that's not what we are there to do. I would say of the sales managers, they spend probably, a couple meetings with me a week on one on numbers, one on problems, and then they're either hiring or they're coaching. And if they're not hiring and going, like I don't know, like this group didn't exist when I started few years ago. And so like, you have people who just like, we had a rep who got up and just didn't come back on Monday. Like, because they're like, oh, I got a new job. And I'm like, what? It's going to hurt you later on. But for now, and so like, if they're not able to spend enough time, like, and when I say upgrade the team, I'm not talking replace the team. I'm just being ready to like respond as much as they can. Then you're not giving them enough space to operate and do their job. And if they're in meetings and they're not able to get on a call when they need to, or like that's where they should be spending all their time. And I personally, I have the belief that every other executive in the company should be making sales calls on behalf of sales, should be out there pitching the clients, should be hawking the stories, telling the thing. You got to believe it. You just don't tell someone else to believe it. And I think the best teams I've ever worked on is the CFO was out there, the CMO was out there. It's a team sport, and sometimes it goes really well, and sometimes it doesn't. So that's the better place to start.
Mark, besides not showing up to work, what skills make reps at FreshBooks most successful?
So it's interesting, and I'm going to do it depends on where you're hiring. So I'll just give you a couple examples. So when we were hiring at my last place, we were talking to CFOs and VPs of sales operations at Fortune 500. We needed people who could run large deals, who could manage complex RFPs, and it cost us a lot of money because you had to actually have them. So we were taking people out of places like Cognos and whatever, and you sort of got to know what that profile was, and then you can go hire. I would always encourage before you go crazy and hire, make sure you have 2 or 3 profiles work, and then double down and double down. At FreshBooks, we have like 3 or 4 different profiles, and so what we do, and some of the folks are in the front here, so maybe they don't even know we do this to them. So when you come for an interview, you're in a matrix. So there's actually 10 attributes depending on the sales team that you're in, Dustin's, and we score because we want to actually know, are we doing a good job as the people who are actually bringing you in? So we actually score you out of 100, and then 3 months in, 6 months in, 9 months in, I make the hiring managers come back and show me the scores again. And I'm of the personal view, if someone leaves in the first 6 or 9 months, we made a mistake in how we scored. So that's like generically what I like to set up. I will say at FreshBooks, I've continued to lean more to no relevant experience in SaaS selling, and much more on collaboration, learning, and grit, and those are pretty easy things, I think a lot of people say, but how you ask the questions and how you get your team to continue to understand what that means inside your organization, and those are the scores, like when I'm asked to sign off on hiring someone, those are the scores I look at more than any skill, because when we've lost reps or exited them after 6 months, 9 times out of 10, we fucked up the score and someone overinflated it.
What are some of the attributes on the matrix?
So
you don't have to list all 10.
No, I can't list all 10. I would say we look for passion. So like I think a lot of people who sell, you have to be passionate. You don't have to show us that you're passionate only about like what we sell to show, oh, you sold accounting before, you're going to be great for us. But if you can show passion, I don't know if anyone hires out of Great Canadian Sales Contest and all that sort of stuff. Like you watch people when they do the videos, because I get to see them every year. You can tell the people who are passionate and the people who are faking it. And so learning what like true passion is. Collaboration, definitely the grit element, and there's usually pieces in people's background where you can really test that. And then I'm a big one on how do you do collaboration, team, and some of those other attributes.
Jocelyn, I'm going to flip the question a little bit and say, when looking at your top performing reps, top 10%, 5%, what patterns stand out? what are they doing that are almost timeless, right? Because there are tactics that are popular a certain period of time and then they get flooded. So, what are the people that are consistently successful doing day in and day out?
So I think sort of counter to the old school profile of sales reps, my most consistent are really super solid project managers. Because certainly in an enterprise sale, it is a project that you are managing with a lot of stakeholders and a lot of communications internally and externally, that if any one of those pieces goes awry, you could really go off the rail. And this is probably in my sort of higher end of deal cycles. But even within sort of my mid-market team, they're running so many transactions that they really need to be able to project manage their deals in their life. So there's more detail orientation than I have. So I would be very bad at it. The other, yeah, it doesn't have to be like granular detail, but they do need to know how to manage many parts running concurrently. You can't have somebody who's waiting to check each box and go all the way down. They have to be able to deal with a complex environment where multiple streams are running and they might all be at different places, and that they can drive the whole picture there. And team and collaboration is massive for me. We end up, certainly in our larger deals, it's a very team-based sale. You're likely to have an executive involved in your deal. You're likely to have at least one, if not, 3 technical people. So your internal communication skills and your desire to collaborate actually really has to be there as well, because you cannot be a lone wolf trying to drive the deal to a close. You will fail at my company if that's your attitude or that's your go-to. For all of my field roles, I am always grit for sure, but I'm also looking for curiosity. We're still in a pretty evangelical sale. So I need people that are sincerely curious about somebody's business, so that they are actually getting to the place where they can understand how to apply it to them, because it's likely that this person has never imagined a world that had us in it. So that ability to bring people into them because they really truly are interested and care. And I don't know that you can really fake curiosity.
Hello. Okay, there we go. One of the questions that we had later on was more about interview processes. And I think now is a good time to ask, specifically because these are characteristics or traits that you're looking for. Can you assess things like team collaboration or curiosity in an interview? And if so, what are some of the go-to strategies that you've implemented as you guys have shifted orgs or brought to your respective orgs? I'll start with you, Jocelyn.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first, because I think mine are less sophisticated and tested than Mark's, because I don't operate at the same scale.
You don't have a matrix that you review every 3 months?
I actually do, but it's not as deep. And I don't use it in hiring as much as I should, so now I'm going to do that. So value to me right away.
Thanks.
There we go. So when I'm hiring for anybody working sort of in our strategic kind of enterprise, larger scale deals, their last interview with us is an exercise that they run with one of my most senior SEs and either me or another sort of leader that'll be in deals with them. And I give them 3 real world scenarios, and actually have them come to the table and come up with a strategy together. The first time I did it, it was 3 deals I had a problem with, so I figured at the very least I would get new ideas. But what it proved to be was actually a really good way to see how they think and how they ask for other people's feedback, and how they kind of integrate other people's ideas into the way they work. And that, for that scale, is there. Within our mid-market, it's not, for us, it's more the communication skill is a little bit more important, and just sort of confidence in how they present themselves. So we do sort of a pretty classic, we have them come and present a customer scenario to us, and that's really against a panel, and we try to sort of test how they are under fire. We ask them questions they couldn't possibly know the answer to and things like that, and just see how they react. So that's largely more about like, how do you work in a situation where you may not know all the answers, and you're working with people. So I have 2 different tests in there. I do have like 5 competencies for every single role, and then my 5 high performance behaviors, which are our company values, or mapped to our company values. So, but I don't use that enough in the hiring process now I think about it. I'm totally gonna do that, and because I do it every 6 months for every function. I go through sort of I look at the scores and make a plan about them, but yeah.
We'll get you to quickly answer that because I want to move to the next one.
I'm not quick at anything, though. It's so slow. Yeah, there's a million ways to test, right? Like
You guys do an assessment?
No, that's the one.
That's
we assess people once they come in, but no, because we don't want to be like, if you use DISC or whatever, you don't want to be biased because you'll just get too many people of the same profile. Senior executives, we case and we take them out for dinner at least 3 or 4 times before we offer them, because we want to actually see them. Sales manager and above level, for me, it's 90-day. What are you going to do in your first 90 days? And that pushes a lot of good conversation. I don't do a lot of the individual rep hiring, but my favorite framework is Challenger sales rep, Gartner, Chief Executive Board, and that's because they teach, do you set value? Do you do differentiation? And are you good at challenging in a non-threatening, aggressive way your customers to actually get a close? So those are sort of the 3 frameworks that I use depending on level.
A million more questions. But I want to open up the floor to the audience now.
Hey. So I'd be interested to know, if you had to choose one book that's made a meaningful impact on your day-to-day life, what would it be?
One book. I would read the biography of Katharine Graham, who took over the Washington Post. So it's the story of, it sort of takes place in the sort of 60s and 70s. I think it's a really good just story about, like, you don't actually have to be like born into like knowing how to like run a massive corporation. You get a lot of people telling you to do different things, and you follow your gut and you learn. I just think it's a really brilliant story.
I go back to Switch a lot. No, I don't. Oh, is it? Yeah. I go back and read Chip and Dan Heath's book Switch a lot. Like, I go back to that because it's a lot about changing behavior, and I don't know. It's good. I like it.
Hi. Hey, I had a question for Mark. You mentioned that there were some sales reps that had left and come back to FreshBooks because of their managers. What were like the 2 or 3 things of those sales managers that I guess differentiated them or made them great?
I think a couple of the things that you want to look for is, God hope you have a manager that doesn't just promote you because it's time for someone to get promoted, because it will catch up to you someday. It will. Like, so, you know, I like hiring people that actually like hold people back a little bit and work on a full rounded spectrum of skills, right? So you might be a wonderful individual contributor, you can close deals, you can hit your number, but you're a jackass and you can't, you know, like, I don't know, there's a great story that I always love to tell when people want to go too fast is the biggest commission check I've ever written for someone was for $750,000, and I fired her a month after I wrote her the check because she decimated the entire organization to get the sale. It just wasn't worth it. So like, to me, I always have that story in my head of, you're always, as sales leaders and individual contributors, going to think the only thing that matters is, did I hit my number? But guess what? Like, the best individual contributors aren't always the best sales managers. They're not the best things. And if you want to learn the next level, the next craft, the next thing, like, take some time, find the person in front, and like really work at it. Because like I started to say, we haven't seen a recession in 12, 15 years. It's coming. And the jobs won't be as plentiful, and there won't be as much out there. And when it does, it's the people who have the right skills that get to stick around. And I just think that the sales managers who push people properly not mean, not bullying, not like, but just have the honest conversation. And if your sales manager can't put like an actual matrix of skills in front of you and say, this is what we're working on, demand it, ask them for it. Say, where do you want me to shoot for? What are the things? Have a super honest conversation about, you know, where am I weak? Like, you want to know where you're super weak.
Hi, Mark. It's a question for Mark. My name's Rob. You mentioned that you focus a lot on data and you utilize it, but you also mentioned that you go back to subjective scoring for measuring your sales reps' performance. How do you merge or plan to merge the objective data measurements and your subjective calls?
Yep. From like all the reading I've sort of done is like we tend to like jump to one thing and everyone gets like super into it. Like I love baseball. I know it's a super slow sport, but everyone is like, it was all analytics. And it's actually not one or the other. It's like, how do you meld those two and take the best pieces together? So, you know, over time, I've got, you know, a little bit more experience to be able to trust my gut earlier before the data perfectly shows up. But I've also learned that I got to input a lot more data and listen to that as well. So I don't see it as a either or. They're tools. They're little mechanisms that are going to give you signals. It's still like the human's got to figure out what to do with the data that's coming at you, and figure out how to use those pieces.
So this is the question for Jocelyn. I'm actually working in a customer success team for my company right now, and we're having a win-back project for this year. So what would you suggest as some strategies to like, they like some features that we have, they like the technical support team that we're having, but they're unhappy with a lot of things that's going on in our company, and they're unsatisfied with a lot of features that we have. So what would be some suggestions that you would suggest?
In terms of actually running a win-back of customers that have left.
Yeah. So we have
I'm
a big
doing that
project
too.
on it this year.
Yeah, no, I'm doing a little bit of that too. Ultimately, if someone's, you do need to understand what they expect to solve with your solution, because it's not always going to be solved by a feature or by your people. I've been lucky enough to work in several organizations where the post-sales team has been, you know, well loved, and that's the service is almost never an issue. So it's typically either a missed expectation in a deal cycle or some sort of a solution cycle misunderstanding, or it's a feature gap. So that's probably the first distinction you need to make, is that do they actually have the problem you solve, or did they buy under sort of false pretense, or is it actually truly a feature gap where they can't accomplish something? And ultimately you have to go back to what is success for them, and then be pretty honest with yourself about whether you can bring that success about or not. And for those that you, within this exercise, honestly tell them that you cannot accomplish that thing, tell them the other things you can. You may find that some of them actually sign up for what you actually solve, even though that's not how they initially came to you. You do need to be, it's actually in a win-back, it's the least risky time to really pull up a mirror in front of you and say, this is actually what we're excellent at. You know, our tool does 3 jobs better than anybody else, but those 4, 5, 6 that you want, we do not. It's the least risky time to be that upfront, and you will learn something for sure, and maybe even a feature that you can add that's not so bad to do. But it's at that point, all you can do is listen. And
That's true.
yeah,
Right.
I mean, they're
That's
fun
great.
programs actually, because they're pretty low risk. So you already lost the money, so you can't. Yeah, you can't do anything any worse.
My only other add to that is 9 times out of 10, the sales team's doing something dumb on the front end. So just go back and figure out what the dumb thing that they're doing. They're over-promising, they don't understand a feature, they're positioning product, not not services, not company credibility. Like, so just like, don't just try and win the customer, fix the upstream problem, because it's tough to just keep winning back. It's better to sell properly.
Always come down to one mic. Thanks for the questions. Another round of applause for our amazing panelists tonight.